Hello and welcome to the post-lab reflection for the Module 5 lab, Redox Reactions, where we'll be exploring the cases of oxidation and reduction. In this lab, we will be creating iron 2 acetate and then using that to create iron 3 acetate. In this reaction, the iron 2 acetate will be losing an electron, which is oxidation, creating the iron 3 acetate, as we will see moving forward. In the first part of the lab, we'll be heating up a mixture that has acetic acid or vinegar with steel wool in order to create a solution of iron 2 acetate. Then in the second part of the lab, we'll be mixing up some hydrogen peroxide with cream of tartar and then mixing that with the iron 2 acetate to create iron 3 acetate. And during that reaction, we will be monitoring the changes in temperature using the thermometer and recording all of our observations. There are a couple of reasons that we really need to maintain situational awareness with this lab, mainly that we're working on the stovetop, so there is going to be a heated surface along with glass, so we need to maintain awareness about what's going on as we're heating the mixture at all times. Be observant of any odd smells or fumes if I feel dizzy. Those are all things to maintain awareness of. Also, because we're working in the kitchen, I do have my pets around, so I will need to maintain awareness of where they are and what they're doing at all times to make sure that they're safe and that the lab is not interfered with in any way. I do have the fire extinguisher in here, so that is ready to go. And then we've got the thermal resistant glove. And with everything now being set up and all of the safety precautions are in place, it is time to start the lab. Here is our solution after boiling the mixture for 45 minutes and allowing it to cool. We can see from the brown residue that the iron 2 acetate did form. Here is where the precipitate has been filtered out. And here is the solution with the iron 2 acetate, which has a milky white color, as we can see in the picture. And here is the result of the redox reaction that created iron 3 acetate. After stirring the mixture for 2 minutes, we can see that it is now a bright yellow color. It also had a temperature increase as it was being mixed, which carried on even through the end of the lab. And here's the thermometer showing that temperature increase. These equations show what took place within the lab experiment that created our iron 2 and iron 3 acetate. Most importantly, because we know that oxidation is loss, we can see that when iron loses an electron, it gets a positive 3 charge, and that helps in the formation of the iron 3 acetate. And we know that reduction is gain, so when we have the reaction with the hydrogen peroxide and we gain 2 electrons, that allows for the formation of H2O or water. So for the next part of the video, we're going to move on to the critical thinking prompt, where we will try to use our best scientific reasoning to explain why we witnessed a color change and a temperature increase during the reactions that took place in the experiment. We can see in the experiment that iron 2 acetate has this milky white color, whereas the iron 3 acetate is this bright yellow. What we know about the iron 2 acetate versus the iron 3 acetate is that there is a slightly different molecular structure. And we know from previous labs that the molecular structure can say a lot about how light is reflected through the molecules, and that changes the way that we see them because of the different wavelengths of visible light. And this is how we can kind of explain this change in color, is because the molecular structure is different. That means that the way that visible light will be perceived by us as we go into a chemical reaction that causes a change at the molecular level, as we see when we change from the iron 2 acetate over to the iron 3 acetate. So then why the rise in temperature in the reaction? Well, if we think about what's going on in a chemical reaction, we know that there has to be some sort of exchange of energy going on. And typically when there's an exchange in energy, if energy is being absorbed, we could see a decrease in temperature. whereas if energy is being released, then we might see an increase in temperature. In our lab, we saw that the temperature rose from about 20 degrees Celsius to about 32 degrees Celsius towards the end, which means that we had a temperature increase. This tells me that energy was released during the chemical reaction. For the final portion of this video, I'm going to be reflecting on two of the module objectives that I was able to demonstrate in the lab and how they were addressed. The first one being the importance of situational awareness in lab work. As I mentioned earlier in the video, since I was working in the kitchen, I did have my pets around me, which is normally not a concern when I'm doing a lab, but was this time, so it was important to be aware of where they were and what they were doing. Also, we were working on the stove, so there was a heating element involved, and this poses its own sort of risk because you need to keep an eye to make sure that it's heating the solution as it was supposed to, but that nothing was burning, nothing was close to the eye, nothing was interfering with the results of the experiment, and that especially no glass was at risk of shattering during the lab. This was a big concern for me because I have had an experience in the past where I accidentally switched a glass cooking container from a very hot state to a very cold state very quickly, and it did shatter. So this was definitely something I was trying to be keenly aware of during the lab, that none of the beakers were put into a situation, especially the beaker that was being boiled in the pot, being put into a situation where the glass would have such stress that it would shatter. And I think I did a very good job with this because everything turned out okay. The second objective I'm going to be discussing is being able to classify observations as evidence of physical or chemical changes. And we discussed this at length already. We could see the physical changes of the colors of the solution as being evidence of a chemical change. Also, when we saw the temperature increase showing an exchange of energy was also evidence of a chemical change. And that concludes the post-lab reflection for the Module 5 lab, Redox Reactions. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.